Johnny B. Dusty Baker was born in Riverside, California in 1949. Moved to Sacramento when he was 14. Was drafted by the Atlanta Braves in 1967. In 68, he started what would be a brilliant 20-year career as a player, primarily with the Braves and the Los Angeles Dodgers. He helped LA to pennants in 77, 78, and to a World Series title in 1981. In 1993, he would embark on his big league managerial career. He is the only manager in the history of baseball, think about that for a minute, to take 5 different franchises to the postseason. The Giants, the Cubs, the Reds, the Nationals, and the Astros, and of course this year culminating with his Astros winning the World Series. He's a husband to Melissa and the father of 2 children. He's also a veteran. Served in the United States Marines from 1969 to 75. All right, Johnny B. Dusty Baker, great to have you with us. What part did I just miss that you're most proud of? Did I miss anything?
No, not really. Probably just probably the fact that I played all sports. Any sport that I could play, I played them. And I wanted to be the best at them, and I wasn't always the best at them, but I was one of the best at most of them. And I would go out and work and practice, and I'd see Elgin Baylor do a move or somebody, and I'd go. I practiced like tirelessly until I had that move, and that was probably sort of culminates how my life has been. Like I'm a guy that's willing to work and practice with a certain amount of skill involved, but mostly it was about determination and practice, I think.
Dusty, I read an article, and one of the pictures, and we all go places where there's pictures hanging up in the wall, and you always had in your offices that I was in when you were with the Giants, the Cubs, the Reds, Washington, not been to the office in Houston, but I'm sure it's still there. It's one of the most amazing photographs I've ever seen. It's of your dad. And I read an article, and tell me if this is accurate. I read an article that your dad was coaching you in Little League Baseball. You had terrible temper tantrums, and that he would throw you off the team. Is that right or wrong?
Well, he didn't actually throw me off the team, but he did cut me off the team. I guess that's the same. I guess that's the same thing. Yeah, he cut me when I was 8 because I struck out and I threw my bat up against the backstop, and he cut me and says I had to play in the minors, for his friend. And then he cut me when I was 9 because I made an error and I stomped on my glove. And then he cut me when I was 10 because my best friend said he's going to hit me in the head with the ball. And the only time I ever been hit in the head was that time, and he did hit me, so I quit. So my dad said no son of his was going to quit, and he cut me when I was 10. And so I finally made his team when I was 11. And 12, and also when I was 12, we were at the All-Star game. We were playing against these big kids from El Centro, and in way Southern California. And he put me in right field, put my best friend at second base, and that's why I was second baseman. And I took exception to that, and I was pouting. And the ball was hit to me, and bases loaded. And the ball hit my glove, went over the fence for a grand slam. We lost the game. And from that day on, I said, well, I'd never pout again. And I was going to, work on being one of the best outfielders that I could be.
Hey, walk me through, and without getting into necessarily a lot of the details about it, but I know that when you were drafted by the Atlanta Braves, and your mom and dad were really worried about the idea of all the racism in the southern part of the United States. They were really worried about their son leaving California and going to the American South. That was a very big deal for them, was it not? How big a deal was it for you?
Well, I didn't really know what I was getting into. Actually, my mom wasn't as opposed to it as my dad. And it wasn't about going to the South. It was the fact that I was forfeiting my scholarships. I had like 40-something in football and 30-something in basketball, none in baseball, a couple in track. And my mom was about education, but my dad, was the enforcer of education. And my mom and dad had just gotten divorced, and I was at a crossroads. I didn't know what to do. I was the oldest of five. My dad had wanted me to go to the University of Santa Clara, where I was going to go play basketball, but it was predominantly rich white school, and I had just come from that environment in Carmichael, where my brother and I were the only black kids in the high school, and so I didn't really want to go to a school like that. I wanted to go to Arizona State, where they at that time you only had to carry a 2.0 to stay eligible and party and have a good time. And my dad read. Well, I don't know where he read it. My dad never cursed. I never saw Playboy in the house, but my best friend, dad took Playboy, and it said that San Jose State and Arizona State were the 1-2 party schools in the country, and those were two schools that wanted me. And my dad reminded me that those are the 1-2 party schools in the country. I wasn't going there, and I don't know. I didn't have the guts enough to ask him where he found his information. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, the Braves drafted me, and my dad told them not to. And so they flew my mom and I to L.A. To work out with the Braves. That's where I met Hank Aaron, and Hank told my mom that he would take care of me as if I was his son, but only sign if I had enough confidence in myself to be in the big leagues by the time my graduating class at Santa Clara, would have graduated. And I mean, certainly, confidence was not. I wasn't lacking in confidence, so I signed with the Braves in Dodger Stadium. Worked out with them, and then I went to Little Rock, Arkansas. Then my mom was more concerned, about me going to the South. But after I came back, fortunately for me, the first ball that was hit to me, we were playing Little Rock, Arkansas. I was with the Austin Braves, and I dropped it, and they had a bunch of people in right field. They were calling me a bunch of names. Some of them I had never heard, and some of them pretty good. And I started crying when to come home. And fortunately for me, I had Ralph Garr as my roommate. He was in the same draft, and Cito Gaston, who was older than me, was in center field. And so I always had guys, that took care of me. And then I had to come home and attend school, because at that time when you signed professional contract, you were professional in every sport. That was the Jim Thorpe law back in those days. And so when I came home, my dad tried to nullify my contract. We didn't speak for 3 years. They invoked the Jackie Coogan child prodigy law, where the state of California took over my finances of the monies that I had signed. They let me buy a car. I had a college stipend, which I was attending a junior college here, so I wouldn't get drafted. And at 21 years old, they released the money to me, and my money had tripled. And at that time, my mean dad wasn't so mean. Excuse me, all of a sudden. And so that's when we got back, tight again and forever and ever.
Henry Aaron, any way to put into words what that guy meant to you in your life as a man and as a player?
Well, he's my dad away from home. And, his wife, Barbara, was my mom away from home. And, he took care of me. And, he made me, go to church. He made me, go to bed, made me get up and eat breakfast. I didn't like some of the stuff that he did, because I'm a man now. I'm grown at 18, 19, 20. But he promised my mom. And, he not only taught us, how to be a man, how to be a prideful African-American man, but, also taught us a number of things on the baseball field, even though we didn't understand a lot of it. But he used to always tell us, hey, man, you may not understand, but at least retain what I'm telling you, and someday you'll see. And throughout my career, there were things that he told me that came back to me a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. He's one of the most astute, people and businessmen that I've ever met. And, I didn't know how fortunate I was at that time, being 19, 20, 21 years old. And he was chasing Babe Ruth around that time, and everybody wanted to be around Hank. And so I got to meet all the civic leaders of our time at that time. Ted Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, Maynard Jackson, Herman Russell in Atlanta, and Andrew Young, and including Jimmy and Lily and Carter, because that was the State House was right down from the stadium. So I met a bunch of people that would school me. I was always the youngest. I was always called the kid, and there were a lot of people that would just school me about life, but I didn't know that how chosen I was to be in that situation in order to pass it on to others, later in my life and earlier in somebody else's life.
You have a brilliant playing career. You were a great player for a long, long time and had, great success individually and collectively, the teams you played for, especially in Los Angeles. In 1993, you are named manager of the San Francisco Giants. What's the best piece of advice, or who is the most influential person that helped you to understand that you're now the manager and no longer a player, and what a successful manager would be?
Well, good question. Al Rosen. Without a doubt. Al Rosen kind of handpicked me. I really didn't want to coach, and I didn't want to manage. I was a stockbroker at the time. Al Rosen had said some, derogatory things, about blacks weren't qualified to do certain things, and then Al, came and got me, and at the time I was getting divorced. So divorce is a theme and a common theme in my, life of success. At the time, I didn't think so, and so again, I didn't want any part of baseball, and I asked my dad. I said, "Dad, what do I do?" He said, "Well, son, go to the mountain and pray on it." So I went up to Lake Arrowhead, my brother and I was about to check in the hotel. I hadn't even prayed yet, to ask for guidance of what to do, same way I did when I started my professional career. And Bob Lurie, the owner of the Giants, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, man, you need to come join us." And I'm like, man, I asked my dad. I went right to the phone and said, "Dad, you think that's a sign?" And he said, "Son," he says, "that's a sign that you don't want to see, because you go up there and ask for direction, and the direction taps you on the shoulder even before you get started, and you need to adhere to what you asked for." And so I decided to go with the Giants as a batting, first base coach, and then the batting coach, and then Al Rosen told me to go to the fall league, and he says, "I want you to go to fall league. The club's going to sell, and Bob Quinn's going to come down and talk to you. The job is yours. Just don't screw it up and trying to show him how smart you are." That's what he told me. And he said, I swear, and he said that managers are born to be fired. So don't worry if down the line you get fired. And I was like, first thing I thought about, not me, man. If I'm going to start with the Giants, I'm going to end up like Lasorda or Walter Austin. I'll be there, my whole career. And I guess Peter McGowan, Al had talked about me to Peter McGowan, because it was his ultimate decision. He was a new owner of the club, and I got to thank Peter also for giving me the opportunity, because that's what's missing a lot of times, especially with African American managers or any young managers, opportunity. And so I can't thank Al Rosen enough for seeing something in me that I really didn't even see in myself.
You take the Giants to the World Series. You lose that heartbreaking series to the Angels. Why did you leave the Giants?
It's a good question. Well, I left the Giants because I had been there 5 years as a manager. As a coach, 10 years as a manager. And Bill Walsh was one of my mentors when I first started this. He used to bring me over to his house, and we'd have these sessions about media and just different things and management, and just he helped me a whole bunch. Him and Al Attles, and he told me, he says, if he had to do his career all over again, he said he would leave to new surroundings every 5 to 7 years, and because he says that every 5 or 7 years there's something during that period that's going to upset you that you don't like about management, and there's something about you that management's probably already upset about. And so, that was a tough decision. And I just did what I thought was right, because sometimes, you'd had enough. Now it made it difficult, once you get to somewhere else, because see, unless you're living in the town, which I'm kind of dealing with now, Thom, a little bit. Unless you're living in the town where you only have to pack for spring training, that's nothing. Living in the town where you live. But if you live in another town, like I live in Sacramento, well, when you leave for spring training, you got to pack for spring training. Then you got to pack for the season. You got to pack for cold weather in New York. You got to pack for hot weather in Atlanta. You got to take almost everything that you own, and that's a double pack twice a year and unpack twice a year. And I didn't think about that then, but my home base is Sacramento, but it was a lot easier when my home base was San Francisco. But that's something that I chose. And people ask me, hey man, were you fired or this and that? And I always tell them, hey man, my contract expired twice. I was fired for sure in Cincinnati because I had 1 year left on my contract, and then one time I left, and that was a very, very tough decision. But I wasn't that happy, and my wife told me she wasn't gonna watch me be unhappy for too much longer.
Did you think in 2003, the way you lost in that league championship series, and you had been managing a number of years now, who would have thought we're having this conversation and you go another 20? But,
Correct.
At that time in 2003, I did that series for Fox. And when you reflect back now, how do you remember, what do you remember about that series? Because that town – you've been to a lot of places, Dusty. I have too. I've never seen anything like that city for those games 6 and 7.
Yeah, me neither. Well, I just think about, all my boys were on the other side. Buddy Back played for me. He was a pitching coach. I played with Mickey Hatcher and Bobby Mitchell, and Sos was the manager. And, by no means people like, oh, why'd you give Russ the ball? I gave him the ball because he had pitched such an outstanding game, and I thought that he had enough, not because I thought the game was over. Now, Felix, who came in, Rodriguez, now he was very superstitious. He would always like to throw the ball out and then get a new ball. And so, things just sort of became unraveled at that time. And, sometimes things can snowball and you can't stop it. You get one hit, boom, 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 and all they needed was that 3-run homer. And I think back, I said, well, should I? What happened is I started bringing the left-hander to change Scott around, but I had seen him hit a home run off a similar pitch that Scott threw. My left-handed reliever. And, I watch a lot of games. I do my scouting reports. So I said, well, I think he would be better. We have a better chance of getting him out, with Felix pitching. And so, man, my heart sank when that ball barely went over the fence down that right field corner. The stands erupted. To this day, I can't stand monkeys. You know what I mean? So
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
I hate monkeys jumping up and down. You know what I mean? It's almost sacrilegious, kind of. But my heart sank, and then I had to make another decision on Game 7, and that Game 6 haunted me for a long time because that was my nemesis until this year was Game 6.
Yeah,
and you hate to have any like a nemesis at all, but we all do. And then Game 7, I had to make a decision between Livan Hernandez and Kurt Reeder, and I went with Livan's experience. But, when I look back, it seems like the softer throwers, the opposition is so amped up that the softer throwers can trick guys more than the guys that throw a little harder. Because I remember Bobby Jones beat us 1-0 in New York, with the Giants. I think that was 2000. And he was throwing like soft. He was throwing real soft. So, you learn about certain things. I mean, you look back and, if the players perform, now you're an expert or a hero. But if the players, don't perform or you put a guy in a position, you hope that he comes through, and they don't always come through, and sometimes the players rescue you by performance. And, that's the tough part about being a manager, Thom, is that and it was so much easier as a player because I'm judged on what I do personally. But as a manager or coach, you're judged on what other people do, that you put into that situation.
You go into the Cubs, and now you come to Cincinnati in 2008. You build this thing up. You've got a nice group of young players. Ownership brings in some other guys. In 2010, the team wins the division on the Jay Bruce home run. You just got beat by a better Philadelphia team. 2 years later, in 2012, it was your best team here in Cincinnati. As you reflect back, and again, all of us, whether it's demons for some of us in one aspect of life, maybe it's decisions and other things, maybe it's just being a part of something that you're watching and witnessing and you can't explain it. When you look back to the Giants series and you're up 2-0, you come back, we know what happens. I can still see Hunter Pence jumping around in the dugout and everything. What happened, do you think, to that team in 2012?
Well, first, let's not skip over the Cubs. You know what
well,
I mean?
I didn't want to skip over the Cubs, but I only got you so long here, Dusty. So,
okay.
All right, let's start with the Reds, and I do want to get back to the Cubs in a second. Yeah. Let's talk about, though,
I got you.
That 2012 team.
Yeah, I mean, we had them 2-0, and then they go ahead and win the World Series, and it was really tough because I live in Sacramento, so this is Giants territory, and it was tough that winter to see Giants stuff on the billboards, Giants flags hanging out the cars. That was the toughest, longest winter that I ever had. But I talked to Scott Rowland the other day, and one of the games, Scott was as sure hand as anybody I ever had, him and Matt Williams. And the balls hit to Scott, would have been the third out, I think, in the 8th inning or the 9th inning. And then the tying run scored. Then they went ahead and beat us. And then Buster Posey, beat us with a grand slam.
Mm-hmm.
And I had talked to some people the night before in Cincinnati, and they told me that the Giants had a big old party, and they were partying, and they were, acting like they were up 2-0. And that taught me something there too, because they were as loose as anybody could be. But we had a young team. Boy, that really hurt. I mean, that hurt big time to be up, 2-0, and then end up, they beat us 3 in a row, which was on my mind this year as well. It's been on my mind every year. It was on my mind when I was in Chicago. We were up 3-2, leaving Miami with coming home with Pryor and Wood. And so, and I remember Pedro Guerrero called me on the phone when I was in Miami. He goes, "Dusty, you got to bury him right now because you let him get off the ground, then anything can happen." And so, these are words that, that I've never forgotten. And actually, this is some of the things that I, reminded my team of this year. But I didn't have to. This is the team that I had this year and last year was a team that I didn't really have to remind that because they had lost a couple of tough series in the past. And so, you hope that you learn from things in life and, perseverance. I was reading this morning, perseverance is the key. And I persevered, but it was taught to me by my dad and my mom at the same time.
Back to the Cub thing. I was doing that series for Fox, and much is made of Game 6. You come back home. You just mentioned you're up 3-2. The Marlins get 8 runs in the 8th inning. There's the whole Steve Bartman drama.
Yep.
I got, Dusty, I got to ask you. And if you want to talk about that game or that series, that's fine. But I have to say this to you, and I don't think I've ever said this to you before. To me, of all the places you've been, and I might be 1,000% wrong, to me, you never seemed happy in Chicago. Is that an unfair statement?
No, it's not unfair. Not unfair at all. because like it just seems like at first the town, the first year the town was seemed like they were for me, and then after that, I mean, I never had. Well, let me put it this way. I was thinking about Hank Aaron, and I got a number of hate calls. I got a number of racial letters. I got a number of things that that really hurt. But I dealt with it because I had been with Hank Aaron. It felt like I was living a part of Hank Aaron's life all over again with him, because I was with him when he was getting those death threats when he was going for Hank Aaron. And see, it's like I felt that the town, like, turned on me.
Yeah, I felt that way. Yep.
And my wife didn't even want me to go out by myself, because I'd always, somebody'd say a wisecrack or something or whatever. The hate crime division of the FBI came in because I got some white powder that they could have been anthrax. At that time, they were sending these letters around with different things. And then I couldn't figure out why the Tribune company didn't spend any more money. I had like a AAA team out there the last year, and I was like, oh, okay. Then I figured it out finally, because it was similar to when I got traded from the Braves to the Dodgers, where you cut your assets and then you sell the team, and then you make I'm sorry, when the Braves were sold to Ted Turner, and traded us all. And we were all trying to figure out why they traded Ron Reed, Ralph Garr, myself, Earl Williams, Thom House. They cleaned house, and it's like, well, why? And then I started thinking back about the Tribune. They didn't put any money back into the club that final year, and then there were guys walking around with the same signs that they were walking around this year for Tony La Russa. I know how he felt when there's Fire Tony or Fire Dusty, and every time I stick my head out of the dugout, I get booed, and it's like, no, I wasn't happy. But hey, man, I really, really wanted to be that first manager to win the World Series there, especially to go back to back, because I went in 2002, and then we had a chance to go in 2003. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would have been historic. And I talked to Jim Hendry. Sometimes talk to him a couple years ago, and if we make a play and turn the double play, with bases loaded, the Bartman game, and then people's like, why'd you stick with Pryor and Wood so long? Because I didn't have the bullpen that I have now. You know what I mean? And that was my one, not weakness, but that was an area of not of strength. And our strength was our starting pitching, Zambrano and Wood and Pryor, and boy, I just I think back, I could have been Joe Madden, at the same time. So, but it was not to be, and I look back and I said, well, if things had gone my way, I probably wouldn't have managed as long as I've managed, that, and I probably wouldn't have hopefully influenced, young men's and women's lives the way that I wanted to. And I remember I told my dad, I said, Dad, I just want to go off and go up in the woods someplace, and then, live my life, happily, thereafter. And my dad told me, he said, son, the knowledge and wisdom that's been given to you, and the great players that you've been around and great people that you've been around, that the Lord didn't want you to take that knowledge with you and run away with it, because it's not yours to possess, that it's yours to share with others. And, when I look back, like I said, I look back on things, and things worked out the way they're supposed to work out.
Why the departure from Cincinnati?
Actually, I didn't want to depart from Cincinnati, but like sometimes I open my mouth, and there's a couple things that I've probably said to Bob Castellini that I shouldn't have said. And, I've learned that, that you don't say certain things to certain people because, you think you're safe because of the amount of money that you're making. But to a rich guy, the amount of money that you're making is probably peanuts to him, really. And so, I said some things, about we need this or we need that. And then Chris Spire said some things. And then they wanted me to fire Brooke Jacoby, and I said, no, I'm not going to fire him. And they said, hey, man, here's your walking papers. And, I thought I was relatively safe. But, that was a blessing in disguise as well because, I got to marry my daughter. Every time I got fired, Tom, I got to, like one time I got to bury my dad. I was home, and, I wouldn't have been home. One time I got to bury my brother. I wouldn't have been home. And I got to see my son graduate from high school. I wouldn't have been home. And then I got to marry my daughter in my backyard by this big tree that she always wanted to get married by. So, like I said, a lot of these things were probably meant to be, and I tried to turn a negative always into a possible positive.
You go to the Nationals. You win 95 games in 16. You win 97 games in 17. You get let go there. Are you scratching your head? Are you scratching your head at this point, Dusty, in all seriousness, with all of the incredible success, minus winning the whole thing, and we'll get to that in a minute. But when you look at the Giants, the Cubs, the Reds, the Nationals, you take all these franchises to the playoffs, you win 97 games in 17, and you're not back. That's almost impossible to believe.
Yeah, well, that was impossible for me to believe. And of all the stops, probably besides San Francisco, I really liked Washington the best. The mixture of races, the cultural things that that are there, the educational component, the White House. I mean, I really liked, the diversity of Washington, and they liked me. But I asked for a raise. I asked for more money, and because I thought I was doing the job. At that time, I had lost like probably 40%. Of where I was before. And I always believe that, hey, if I do the job, even as a player, if I do the job, then I should be paid accordingly. And, we never got to the point of negotiation or anything. And then I stayed around for a week. I packed, went to the office every day, waited around to find out, what was going on. And then so I finally said, hey, I'm going home. I came home on a Thursday, and then Friday morning, once I was home, then I got a call, from Rizzo, who I could tell, man, he really wanted me back, and I liked working with him. And he says, hey, man, that old famous, they're going another direction, and you really want to ask, well, what direction is that?
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, I hate that. Let's go. We're going another direction. You know what I mean? So, anyway, that was, that was that. I didn't understand it, but I wasn't their first choice in the first place, and Buddy Black had been their first choice, but Buddy had asked for a certain amount of salary, and they refused it, and so they gave me a little bit more than they gave him, but when I look back at it, I mean, I like to think that it was probably a money decision versus a decision on how you do on the field. But sometimes I would feel during my career that if I didn't win it all, that I was deemed like a failure. And I was like, there's only going to be one winner. You know what I mean? And I've never ever let myself, feel like a failure ever. I mean, I've gotten down, like my dad used to tell me, it's okay to get down, just don't stay down. And, I've lived that code and, all my life. And so I always said, if I win one, I'm going to win two. And the reason I want to come back next year is because I want to be a liar. And I want to win two like Cito Gaston did back to back. And, I'm full of goals. And Plus, you look at it, and I mean, there was a 2-year period between each time I lost my job times 3. That's a lot of victories and that's a lot of earning power, during that 6 years in there. But again, like I said, I accomplished some things in life and family that I wouldn't have been able to do had I been in the game. So, like sometimes what you want to do and what God wants you to do are 2 different things. And so I've just learned, hopefully I've learned this lesson that, you better do what the man asks you to do upstairs.
You finally win the whole thing this year. I thought, and I thought the way you brought this team through the whole cheating scandal thing, that in and of itself, I thought was just one of the greatest managerial things, lack of a better word, that I've ever seen. You blow through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. You lose game 1 of the series. You tie it. You fall behind 2-1. You mentioned that you knew that, hey, look, we just got to keep going and keep going. When the final out happens, or maybe it's a sequence of that final half inning or the last couple of innings, you've got to pay attention to the game. But, hey, whether it's the Lord working in mysterious ways or your mind drifting into things, was there something that popped into your head during all that you were thinking about? That here we are and this is going to happen, finally?
Mm-hmm. Well, you start counting outs, but, you don't – the game's not won until final out. And, I was just thanking the Lord for bringing me to that point, thinking that, I was actually playing this year for my mom who passed January 31st before the season started. So this year didn't start off very, very good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, and I was thinking about my brother who passed 3 years ago, my dad who passed 10 years ago. And, my dad, when I was a kid, I heard him, he was playing pinochle with his buddies. And they used to play like late at night, and I'm using the bathroom, but I'm listening to him. And one guy, I'm the oldest of 5, and my brother was actually a better baseball player than me. And, I was better in football and basketball, but he was a lot better in baseball. And he didn't sign because he wore glasses. They didn't like signing the kids, that wore glasses that their eyesight, was going to get worse. Excuse me, and that, they didn't have contacts back then. And so my dad, this guy was telling my dad, man, Dusty's going to be a good ball player. And my dad says, yeah, but you got to see Rob, man. Rob's going to be the player. So I never let him know that I heard this or anything. But also when I lost in Anaheim, my dad was at the game. And my dad was down and out and sad. And see, back then, the older generation, a lot of times they would use negative motivation as like you can't do this or hey man, you won't do that. Where nowadays you can't use negative motivation, to the young kids because a lot of them will just sit out on you and quit. You know what I mean? So my dad, never forget, and I've told people this. He told me, he said, son, I don't know if you'll ever win one, a pennant or not. We didn't win it that year in San Francisco because, we had them down, you know what I mean? And he says, I don't know if you'll ever win one, after this. And that's the first thing that I thought about was say, hey, Dad, you're wrong again. I mean, I swear that's the first thing I thought about. Dad, you're wrong.
Everybody wants to say, Dad, you're wrong, right?
Yeah, but there's only a couple times in your whole life that you're going to be able to say it.
You're right about that. My dad's never been wrong. You know that.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, that is definitely the truth. The older you get, and frequently we talk about this word when we talk about presidents, former presidents. The word legacy. Look, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody in any sport in my life, any one individual, that had more people rooting for Dusty Baker to win a World Series, more so than anybody else I've ever seen in my life. I mean, everywhere I went around here in Cincinnati and just talking to people and then talking to people outside of town. And you had to feel this and sense this and heard from so many hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands. But Dusty Baker's legacy, what I know about you or think I know about you, and a lot that I don't know about you, your legacy to you means what? It can't be all about being a World Series champion. That's certainly part of it.
No.
But when you think about the legacy of Dusty Baker, and a lot of people don't like to think this way because you're not dead, but
thank you.
What would it be? You're welcome. What would it be? What do you want it to be?
Never really thought about it. Now that you mentioned it, if I hadn't won, I think a lot of people would have lost hope and faith, not in me necessarily, but faith in the right thing happening sometime, for the right person, because there's a lot of people that feel hopeless in this world, and a lot of people that I talk to, they put some of their hope and their strength and their perseverance into you and what you're doing in order to, sort of like a mirror that they're looking into to let them know that they have some hope. You know what I mean? And it's a bad feeling, to feel hopeless. I think that's one of the worst feelings in the world is hopelessness and guilt. And those couple things can just eat you up, which I saw it eat my brother up, who died of manic depression, and one of the saddest situations I've ever seen. But I think that what we did, it now, like I said, hopelessness, it gets rid of that, perseverance, definitely, and also the fact that possibly forgiveness, because I think that the hardest thing in life, one of the hardest things for me to do is forgive. My auntie used to tell me all the time, nephew, you got to forgive. It eats you up. I could hold a grudge from now to doomsday. You know what I mean? But it does you no good. And, I think that, the fact that, we won, gives a lot of people the things that I talked about, in the past. I mean, I've talked to many people, grown men, women, little kids, and a whole bunch of people told me they were crying. And my dad always said, "Hey, don't be crying, boy. I'll give you something to cry about." You know what I mean? And so, the fact that people admitted this to me, that they were emotional and crying, that shows me that they're not, ashamed or afraid to show, their emotions. And I'm hoping that what we did, gave a tremendous amount of hope and forgiveness for whatever happened in Houston, and hopefully it's over now. You know what I mean?
Well, Dusty, I've met a lot of amazing people in my life, and I think that I think there are often times, you talk about forgiveness. I think that, sometimes we go through life, and I'm sure you've had this, where maybe, the forest for the trees, you don't appreciate situations or you don't appreciate people maybe at the time in your life as you get older and you look back on those things. And you're one of those guys that, I regret I didn't get to know better, because I had a chance to be around you the years you were with the Reds. You're an amazing man on so many levels, and levels are so much deeper than being a baseball manager. You're an amazing guy. And I know I speak for so many people that are just so excited for you that you're healthy. You've had to battle through cancer, that you keep coming back for more, man. You keep coming back for more. And
well, it's getting close time to the end, though. You know what I mean? It's like,
well, I don't know if it is or not. I mean, you just keep coming back. I wouldn't say that. That's bad mojo. You know that. You can't say that.
I was done. I didn't say I was done. I was saying I'm getting close. You know what I mean? Every year is one step closer. But yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's been great. It's been great to be back home. I just got home yesterday.
Yeah,
and it's a great thing to to talk to you. And I was talking to my wife last night about like I thought I heard some guy trying to sound like you the other day on the NFL football, and I was like, man, we got to get you back on TV because you're certainly one of the best.
Well, I appreciate it. Dusty, I can't thank you enough for your time today. You just got back from Houston. It's been an incredibly long journey going back to spring training. And congratulations, and sincerely from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for taking the time bright and early out in California this morning to join us. Can't thank you enough.
All right.
God bless you. God bless you, my friend.
Good luck to you, my brother. All right.
Thank you, man.
Later.
All right. Dusty Baker. Doesn't get any better than that.